What a game last night. I couldn't sleep. That was amazing. We said it was going to be an NCAA tournament type of game. I guess I didn't think it would follow it by script of ending in a buzzer beater, going to overtime, stories of the hometown kid taking down the team he idolized. That game had everything. But we will get into it here in just a few. But welcome, everyone, to the Media Row podcast with Justin Miller. I'm Justin Miller. An absolute amazing game last night. The Drake Bulldogs take down Kansas State in Kansas City in a back-and-forth battle, 73-70, in overtime with a buzzer beater where Bennett Sturts, calm, cool, and collected, pops a three with about 3 seconds left to take down the team he idolized growing up in the Wildcats. Just an absolute amazing game. Megan, my girlfriend, who isn't big into sports, was watching the game with me last night, and she was glued to it. And it just had that March Madness feel of, wow, we're seeing everything tonight. So Drake improves to 10-0, and before we get into any X's and O's, any breakdown, just watch how this actually went down.
Down to 6 for the tie. A three. Good!
Tell him to play it out.
No timeouts. Drake's got to shoot it. Starts. Got it! Incredible! Still time to tie it for another overtime.
Absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. I was here for it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Now, I really liked the first half. Drake came out. Remember, we gave our 3 keys to what Drake needed to do to beat Kansas State in Kansas City on the road in a hostile environment. And number 1 was it can't just be one guy. It can't just be Sturts like we saw in Valpo, because Kansas State's a way better team than Valpo. And Drake came out following those 3 keys to a T. They came out perfect in that first half. And especially, speaking of perfect, was the lethal Mitch Mascari. Mascari came out 6 of 6 from 3, was throwing up darts, had multiple threes where he was off balance, shot clock was running low, just had to get a shot up there, and it went down. I saw a few tweets from Drake fans that were in the stadium that said you can see when he hits those kinds of shots, the Kansas State bench shaking their heads going, I don't know what else we're supposed to do. And there's really not much you can do. But Drake in that first half, they start out on an 11-0 run. Mascari, Maniau get involved early, out-rebounding Kansas State early. And with about 11:30 to go, they had 6 assists on 6 made field goals. So they were moving that ball around too. And that was another big key that we mentioned of not, getting stuck in those late shot clocks like we saw, and possibly getting shot clock violations like we saw against Valpo. But Mitch Mascari, his first half was unbelievable. 6 of 6. He's now shooting 60% from the three-point line on neutral courts so far this season. He's one of the nation's best and most efficient three-point shooters, has a high arching shot, which allows him to put up those highly contested shots and make them look so easy. But started off 6 of 6. Drake, early on in that first half, was up by 20 at one point and just was able to do everything. They were getting out into space. They were running. They were physical. They were frustrating Kansas State. They were doing everything we asked for. But we said it was going to be an NCAA tournament type game. We knew Kansas State was going to go on a run, and that happened towards the 5-minute mark, I want to say, before halftime. And Kansas State just started getting momentum from their bench, and Drake was feeding into it. They were starting to get lazy with their passes, which is a critique I will get into in a little bit. But Kansas State just started getting turnovers from Drake, and they hit a spark where they couldn't miss. And they quickly, it went from being a 29-9 lead for Drake to at halftime, you're looking and Drake's up by 9, 36-27. But you really felt like, man, Drake should be up by way more. They really gave Kansas State some momentum to go into the locker room. And you knew it's basketball. Runs are going to happen, especially in games like this with two talented teams. But the second half starts, and you're expecting Drake to kind of come out with the same momentum. You know Kansas State is going to want to push back, but Drake really, like, that second half was hard to watch. Really hard to watch. 9-minute mark, Kansas State takes their first lead, 51-49. Kansas State in that second half, I mean, they were shooting lights out in the second half. Drake, a team that was so efficient in the first half, 8 of 20 from the field, 8 turnovers in the second half. And you just had a Kansas State team being able to do what they wanted. So it's just a back and forth game. Thanks to Drake's big lead in the first half, they were able to withstand a Kansas State run, and they were able to really call in response, even though those shots were few and far in between in the second half. But it was a back and forth game, like we've been saying. Hawkins, the multi-million-dollar man on Kansas State, $2 million NIL deal, hits some big shots in regulation, and we go into overtime. And that felt like a win for Drake, because towards the end, man, it really looked like Kansas State was going to sneak out of that game after Drake gave up a 20-point lead. It really felt like Kansas State was going to sneak out with the win. But they force overtime, and that's when Bennett Sturts turned it on. Mascari had the first half. Bennett played well in the second half, and then in overtime, that was his game. And I made a tweet where I said, I want Bennett Sturts in overtime right before tip-off. I want Bennett Sturts in overtime demanding the ball. Because we saw Jackson coming up with the ball up court. We saw Maniau a few times, Mascari a few times, which in normal games, I'm okay with. Down the stretch, give it to your main guy and allow Sturts to create, because that's what he's so good at. He's so good at getting those high ball screens from Maniau, from Abreu, and driving to the paint and being able to make those decisions as a strong point guard to either go up with the tough shot or be able to kick it out, and you have Mascari who's on fire. So going into overtime, Drake was shooting so poorly, but Bennett Sturts goes in, he demands the ball, and he was the one taking it up the court the whole time in overtime. Goes into overtime, scores 8 points, and again, the hometown kid, Bennett Sturts, grew up in Liberty, Missouri, which is only a few miles away from downtown Kansas City, and grew up a diehard Kansas State fan. His family, they said it throughout the broadcast, they had Kansas State shirts growing up as a kid. That's who he wanted to play for. That was his dream college. And he goes out there, and after Hawkins, who had multiple opportunities to really give Kansas State either the lead or tie it up with Drake in overtime and not let Drake kind of have all the momentum and have whatever they wanted in overtime. He had opportunities to close that gap at the free throw line. 1 of 5. Or I'm sorry, goes to the free throw line 2 of 6. The team was 1 of 5 from the field. But the man you're paying $2 million for goes 2 of 6 at the free throw line. Hits, though, a huge three. Ties it up at 70 apiece with only a few seconds left. And that's when you go, hold on to the ball, Drake. You don't have any timeouts. Just try to get a good shot up. And if it goes in, great. If it doesn't, let's play for double overtime. And Bennett Sturtz, calm, cool, collected. Just takes a few dribbles, makes one. It wasn't a super fancy move, but makes a move on the defender and pops the shot from around the right wing and drains it. And it was electric. It was unbelievable. And you just have a team and that Ben McCollum has surrounded with Division II players that he knows. The team knows each other. And going up against Kansas State, one of the highest paid rosters. Hawkins, $2 million. And now, I don't know if you saw this, but Hawkins in his post-game conference talked about how he can't even open up his phone. And he's getting, messages of, man, I hope you break your leg. And that's wrong. But when you're getting paid $2 million, I'm sure LeBron has gotten death threats. I'm sure you've heard NBA players and professional athletes talk about what happens. And that's just, I'm not saying it's right. It's not by any means. It's a basketball game. This guy is a kid still. But when you get put in the spotlight, when you're making millions of dollars, it's one of the negatives that comes from it. Again, not right by any means. But you have a team that is built through all this cash, and then you have a team of Division II starters and champions. And people were saying on Twitter, the power of friendship. And that's the team that went out and won. Now, there's other factors. I thought Drake was the more physical team. I thought Yao played great. A few fouls that, man, I'm not going to blame the refs, but a few fouls I thought just, when he's a smaller guy going up against Hawkins, I don't know what else you want him to do, but he fouled out, and that was a huge blow with how strong he was rebounding the ball. Abreu picked up a handful of fouls, but man, he really played well down the stretch. A few steals. His ability, I think Abreu, one of his biggest things that he does on this team that maybe goes unnoticed or isn't as noticeable because everybody looks at his size, what he can do in the post, rebounding, and the ability to shoot from outside and stretch the offense, is his want on defense. His ability to intercept passes, get steals, deflections, sometimes things that you don't see in a box score, but when you watch a game, they're so vital. Last night in overtime, he had that perfectly anticipated steal where he was in a 4-point stance. Guard goes to swing it to the right corner, and he just tips it, steals it, and goes coast to coast. Had a few times, too, where Sturtz got a few steals and had a wide open lane, and if it wasn't for Abreu hustling down the court when Sturtz got blocked, that ball is going to Kansas State, and there's a missed possession. There's an empty possession for Drake. But his hustle and second chance opportunity right there, those were the types of plays, too, that will go unnoticed because of the great shot Sturtz hit and the amazing game Mascari had. But those second chance efforts, those hustle plays by Abreu, those were game changers. But an amazing game. Drake 10-0 for the second time in team history. And again, it's because of this shot.
No timeouts. Drake's got to shoot it. Starts. Got it!
Sorry, I had to play it again. I had to. It's such a good shot. And just how calm he was is the biggest thing that sticks out to me. In a moment like that, packed crowd, hostile crowd, and he makes one move and drains it. But a game like that for Drake, where you have such a strong start, Mascari, again, 6 of 6 from 3, could do no wrong. The team was following the 3 keys that I mentioned yesterday of can't just have one guy be the main guy. You have to move that ball around. At one point, they had 6 made field goals on 6 assists to start the game. The defense was physical, out-rebounding Kansas State, forcing Kansas State to shoot 0 of 4 in their first 4 possessions and take bad shots too. And limit the second chance points, limit the $2 million man in Hawkins. Drake was doing everything perfect in that first half. And then the second half, they shoot 8 of 20. They really can't get much going. You have Sturtz getting face guarded. You have Mascari getting face guarded. So they're kind of getting taken out of that second half. Sturtz is so good with those high ball screens, though, like we've talked about, where he can create his own shot better than I think anyone else on this Drake team. So he played strong in that second half, was the biggest key in that second half, putting up 16 points in both the second half and overtime. But when you have a challenge like that of great first half, a really bad second half, you force overtime and you just take over overtime, you win the game. Those are the games that champions win. Your back's up against the wall. You can't believe you're standing there in shock that you just gave up a 20-point lead and now you're having to go into overtime. Those are the games champions win. Backs up against the wall and you still find a way. And Ben McCollum talked about it of, yeah, you look at the stats and everything, but you see want, and you just see the physical nature of this Drake team, and it's usually the more physical team is going to come out and win. And we said it was an NCAA tournament type game, and it lived up to the hype of back and forth, drama, storylines, and a buzzer beater. All of that together, and Drake comes out on top, 10-0 for the second time in school history. An outstanding game, but I do want to hit on, while we've talked about the positives, there's a few negatives that really bothered me and are cause of concern, I think, moving forward. One of them, I think, is very coachable, and Drake was having to go up against a Kansas State team that towered over them. They had a lot of size on that Kansas State team. They just don't know how to use it right now. They're really struggling on the rebounding side of things. But Mitch Mascari, while he was great on offense, defense, he got picked up in those screens a lot. And I don't know if that's a communication thing with Drake or if it's Mitch needing to go over on those screens instead of under, because, man, when he went under in that second half, it became clear that's how Kansas State was attacking Drake, was just screening Mascari and forcing him to really work on defense. And a few times he was trying to help in the paint. That would leave open a guy for 3. And it was noticeable in the second half. He played that well in the first half and in overtime, but that was one of the concerns I had, but I think is very coachable. I think will get fixed. And we've seen Mascari play some really good defense in that Charleston Classic against a good team like Vanderbilt, Miami, FAU. So we can do it against good opponents. I think last night, that was just the first time where I was like, man, this doesn't look like Mascari on defense. Seeing him on offense, that's the Mascari we see and want. But the other one was the play of Jackson. And he just had a tough night. And I don't know if it was one of those where you're not seeing the ball go in and it's starting to get into your head mentally because I remember interviewing Bill Fenley one time and talking about, how do players just work through that adversity of, just a bad shooting night. And he talked about how when you're a college kid, and even if you're playing basketball, your job is to put the ball through the hoop. And when that isn't happening, it's really hard to do all the other little things to your full potential. And I think that's what happened with Jackson, because he had some very uncharacteristic mistakes. Really over dribbling, not moving the ball around. And then he shot 34% from the 3-point line last season at Northwest Missouri State. And he was passing up wide open threes. Wide open threes. They would do a screen for him, Manuel or Abreu, and he would sit there and have a wide open look and decide to drive into the paint, try to spin around, and go up against 3 defenders. And in that second half, when every possession was mattering, because Kansas State was really pushing, and Drake, to try to get some of that momentum back, couldn't afford turnovers and bad shot selections. That's what was happening, and it was uncharacteristic. He shot 0 of 6 and had 2 turnovers, and they were lazy turnovers too. He would dribble, and they would do that dribble handoff that McCollum likes to see his guards do to get movement across the arc, and they would kind of be lazy passes that would just get tipped or just completely ripped away. And it was uncharacteristic. I think it gets fixed, but that one was really concerning. The main moment, though, where you saw, okay, he's just kind of in his head. And I think McCollum saw it, because right away after that play, he got taken out, and you could see McCollum talk to him on the bench, was towards the end in the second half, back and forth game, hard-fought game. He gets pushed over the back, which should have been a call. I agree that he's upset about this foul call. But while there's a Kansas State player sitting on his ass, the ball is still live. Jackson turns over mid-play to argue with a ref, and the ball is rebounded by the Kansas State player sitting on his back. That is, you can't have that. Drake got away with stuff like that last night, thankfully, but you can't bet that Sturtz is going to hit that 3, that Hawkins is going to miss free throws, that teams are going to miss free throws down the stretch. You have to play through. And I think Jackson will. I think McCollum will get these guys. These are those early season non-conference battle tests that you want to see, because you're going to have tough fought games. Refs aren't making calls on your side that are really going to put pressure on you mentally, also physically too, as you're getting beat up, that you have to just play through. And that is what Drake did last night. And Jackson struggled to do it, but the team as a whole, they went through it last night and they got the victory. And again, that is what championship level teams do. Those were my 2 concerns from last night. Just felt like Mitch Muscari, we weren't used to seeing him getting burned on defense as often as we're seeing in that second half, where he really struggled to fight through those pick and rolls or pick and pops. But I think that's coachable. And I think Jackson, it was just a mental lapse where he was getting beat up. A few calls weren't going his way. He was getting frustrated with that. Wasn't able to make those shots. 0 for 6 is really frustrating when you're coming back home. And I think it was just one of those got in his own way, because then it really hurt him when he was doing the little things that he's usually great at. He's one of the better passers. And I say that he led the team in assists. He had 8 last night. But when you're watching it live and you're not constantly looking at the box score, when you're just watching it on TV, those are the little things you pick up. And I right away, when McCollum pulled him and was talking to him on the bench, that's the trust and relationship you want to see from your coach and player. When one's struggling, they're going to pick each other up. They're going to talk about it, and they're going to try to figure it out. And I'm just excited to see what this Drake team does, because we saw in that first half what this team is capable of when they're clicking. And, man, not many teams, especially in the Valley, could keep up with a Drake team that has a Mascari shooting 6 of 6, that has Sturts being able to drive into the paint, kick it out, Abreu's confident shooting from deep, and Manyau's cleaning up the glass. As well as just everything they do so well on defense of physicality, getting steals, anticipating lanes, passes, cuts, all of that. Not many teams in the Valley will be able to keep up with Drake if they play to that potential. So, Drake 10-0. Up next for the Bulldogs, they play Green Bay, if you don't remember, coached by Doug Gottlieb. Green Bay struggling this season, 2-10. That game Saturday at 5 o'clock, and then Drake has a nice little break before kicking off Valley play, where they could be number 1 in the Valley, taking on the second best team in the Valley in Belmont in the Knapp Center on that Sunday following Christmas. So could be exciting heading into these next 2 games. I think Green Bay, Drake will definitely should win that one. You're at home. You're coming off of that emotional win against Kansas State. That's the little fear I have, is you just can't get too caught up, because Gottlieb will have his guys ready to go in Des Moines. But Drake taking on Green Bay Saturday at 5 o'clock. Throughout this week, we'll preview that game more in depth. But again, Drake taking down Kansas State. Sturts finished with 22 points. Mascari 25. You had Manyau with 11 and 7 rebounds. Hawkins for Kansas State finished with 16 points. So that was your Drake breakdown. It was a great game. Can't wait to just follow this team. It's such an easy team to root for. And when they're clicking, I mean, it shows why they're one of the 4 teams left unbeaten. But before we close out today's show, want to go through the Missouri Valley Conference games you'll see tonight, starting off with the biggest one. There's 5 games tonight. There's only one conference versus conference opponent game tonight, and that is Indiana State taking on Murray State. Game being played in Indiana State, which is a tough building to go into. Drake fans know. You have 6-3 taking on 6-4, 6 o'clock on ESPN+. The Sycamores have won 3 straight. They're starting to find a rhythm. They're really strong around the field where they shoot 50%. But with all that being said, ESPN and the bettors going up against a team that has won 3 straight, picking Murray State by 3.5 points, thinking it will be a close one. And I think the reason is you look at what Prohm has been able to do with Murray State early this year, and he has a balanced team, a team that shoots 50% around the field, a team that shoots 40% around the arc, and has all 5 starters averaging 10-plus points a game. So I think you look at those stats, and of course your eyes are drawn to how well the starters are for Murray State. You also see the stat that sticks out for Indiana State, and that's 15 turnovers a game. And Prohm, people in Iowa know how he liked to get his teams out and going and moving in space, and he did that a lot by good defense and, fast break opportunities. Good chance for Murray State to get that opportunity tonight with a team that struggles turning over the ball like Indiana State. So I'm with the bettors. I think Murray State comes into Indiana State and wins this one, but I do think it's close, and I think it will be a good game to watch. Now, there's a lot more top 25 games being played tonight than there were last night, so not as many eyes, will be able to shift over to ESPN+. You may have to quad box it, and that's what I may do. But what's set up is the only ranked matchup tonight is you have Michigan taking on Oklahoma, 24 versus 14. And Drake fans rooting for Michigan because Drake wants to be one of the 3 teams left unbeaten because Oklahoma, of course, 10-0 right now. That game starts at 8, so perfect. It's set up perfect for a guy like me where I can watch Indiana State and Murray State at 6 o'clock, 2 hours, boom, flip it over to the ranked versus ranked matchup. So a good night of basketball today. 5 Missouri Valley Conference games, only 1 conference game, though, being played with Murray State taking on Indiana State. 6-4 Indiana State taking on 6-3 Murray State. Before we close out today, I want to hop on my soapbox real quick because I saw this right before I clicked record. So have you guys seen we have Saturday Night Football with the Texans taking on the Chiefs. Really good game. It's going to be a great game, and Arrowhead will be electric. But they're doing a Madden cast where like Chad Ochocinco is going to be one of the main attractions, which I like Chad Ochocinco. But my biggest question is, who is this for? I get when you do the Toy Story games or the Nickelodeon games, they're not meant to be, attractive to guys like me. They're meant to try to get the younger audience involved with the NFL. I'm all for it. Go for it. I think it's kind of dumb at times, but again, it's not supposed to be for me. This one, I feel like, is supposed to be towards my targeted age and generation because I'm a gamer. There's times where I look like Vince Vaughn from The Breakup with the headset. I play Call of Duty. I buy the Maddens, and I was all hyped with the new NCAA game. I'm all for video games. But there's no shot in hell I'm ditching the real game broadcast for a Madden cast with Ochocinco. No shot. No shot. But, so that makes me, and I don't think any of my buddies, even my major, like, where they enjoy video games 100 times more than me, I don't even think they would skip the main broadcast for a Madden broadcast. So who is this trying to get involved into the NFL? That's my biggest question. That I just wanted to bring it up because I saw it legit right before I clicked record. But it'll be interesting. Tomorrow we'll talk more football because heading into tomorrow, we're 24 hours away from the first college football playoff game in Indiana and Notre Dame Friday night, which I'll give my takes on Notre Dame. I'll let you know how I feel about Notre Dame. But thank you all so much for hopping on with me today. Drake gets the victory, 10-0 for the second time in school history. Thank you all so much. Follow us on @MediaRowPod on Twitter, Justin_C Miller on Twitter, Justin Miller on air on TikTok, as well as continue to subscribe on YouTube @MediaRow. Thank you so much, and we will all see you tomorrow around the same time.